Ridge Racer was a prominent racer series of the 90s that had its days in the arcade machines. This franchise, along with the likes of Virtua Racing, Daytona USA, and many more throughout the 90s, would reach out to many arcade centers, giving people a more immersive experience with a complicated setup, while still providing a fun but more simplistic feel to its gameplay core. Ridge Racer was a series that excelled at this, providing distinct racetracks and flashy cars with the habit of power sliding and gripping. Namco had seen the potential of the PS1 and would later transition to that console, seeing how it was only the beginning of 3D entertainment in video game form. With the original Ridge Racer, Rage Racer, Ridge Racer Revolution, Namco wanted to get one more in the bag before the PS1's lifespan would cease 2 years later, with the launch of the PS2, where they would move on and create Ridge Racer 5. The one last hurrah I am referring to is Ridge Racer Type 4. Ridge Racer Type 4 is a continuation of the legacy that the previous titles had left behind. To showcase its evolution in how far it had come, it showed off an early CGI intro, showing the mascot girl of the Ridge Racer series. It didn't really make a lot of sense, but it is really well made, and this was a huge leap compared to titles like Final Fantasy or Tomb Raider and many other PS1 titles that had also played around with early CGI cutscenes. Once you move past the intro, you're then greeted by an announcer and a list of options within the menu to select from. For just about any racing game released around this time, it was to be expected that you would have a championship mode, a single race mode where you could do either time trials or races that let you select the car and the number of laps and opponents. What you'll notice before the gameplay even starts is the presentation of the game, starting with the menu itself and the UI. It's one of the most stylistic and distinguishable menus I've seen in this era of gaming. The sleek display of graphics and consistent frames also give it the impression that it was something ahead of its time, but came out early, blowing most of the other games out of the water in this department. Arcade races were also known for their simple but stylistic UIs, and this one was genuinely well made, to the point where if I didn't play this for a year and saw a picture around that time, I would still recognize it. You have the Grand Prix mode, the crux of the game's replay value. The time attack mode that lets you select a preset of cars and 4 different maps. The other 4 you have to unlock by completing the GP once. Speaking of which, you will be spending your time on this mode. Quite literally, because other than the versus battle for split screen multiplayer and the extra trial mode to win OP cars, the GP's all you've really have. The GP's all you've really got. It's disappointing that they didn't implement a single race mode, which isn't in this game. So, how is the GP? Well, it's both short and unbelievably long, which I'll explain why later. So you have 3 stages. The first one is 2 races long and you have to at least qualify for 3rd. The second stage is 2 races again, but you have to qualify for 2nd. The final stage is 4 races long, and of course, you have to win. So once the announcer has introduced you to the GP event and how it works, you are then introduced to 4 different teams competing for the title. You have DRT from the USA, the hardest team to play with due to their difficult cars. Then the Mappy team from France, one of the easier teams. Solvalu, an Italian team with the fastest cars, so to speak. And finally, the PRC, or Pack Racing Club, the Japanese team that I picked first because they were the easiest and I liked their liveries for their cars. In any case, you select the team that you like, you're introduced to the manager, and then they ask you which sponsor you want to go with. The designs are dependent on your preferences, and they either do drift or grip, which are the main 2 ways of handling in this game. For now, just pick whatever you want and get started. From here on out, your goal is to win all 8 races and obtain the title. That's pretty much it. Each team has their manager with their own backstory and their own motivations for why they want to win the tournament. And as each race is finished, more of their character is unraveled. To be honest, I didn't pay too much attention, and I don't really think you're missing out too much on anything, since racing games didn't really focus too much on rich storytelling. However, it does add personality and a sense of weight to the tournament, where their dreams and hopes are placed on you, and depending on your chances of success, it either becomes a reality or simply just a dream for the current season. But depending on your wish to get more out of the game, well, contrary to its apparent size, it's actually one of the grindiest racing games I've ever played. And not necessarily in a good way either. When I said it was long, I meant it. So, this is how it goes. Say if you play all 4 teams and win the GP 4 times, you'd think that'd be the end of it, right? Wrong. You see, there are 3 main factors in this game: the team you pick, the sponsors, and the qualifying positions. So with each completion of the stage, you get a new car for the next one. Now whether it's a good car or not is based on where you qualified. The lower down the bracket, the weaker the car, and the opposite is true if you come first, where you get the best cars. You can play the same team again, but with a different sponsor, and this is where the grind really rears its ugly head. Basically, the car pool is incredibly large for such a short game, over 321 cars to be exact, and the last one is unlocked after obtaining the other 320, and 4 of those cars are obtained through the extra trials. So to unlock them, you have to use each team a multitude of times, with different sponsors and different qualifying positions for each stage in order to get all of the respective cars for the team. Then you have to repeat the entire process again with the next team. To fully complete all 4 teams and to get all the cars, not including the extra trials, you will be spending hours upon hours. It will take a really long time. This progression system is one of the most backwards designs I've seen in any racing game, and the thought of actually tackling it fills me with dread. It'll take every ounce of patience you have to 100% this game. In fact, you will probably 100% Gran Turismo 4 sooner than doing the GP in this game over 100 times. So what about the game then? Why do people still revere this title in spite of what I just said, and regard it as one of the best races? Well, the reason why people are willing to go through the grind for this game is because it is both beautiful and fantastically built in the core racing, the handling, the nuances between each car and how they function. The tracks are beautifully detailed for PS1 standards, with a good variety of tracks despite the limited number of them. You start in the last place, and you work your way towards the qualifying positions. Whichever one you pick is up to you, as long as the number is flashing gold, you're good to go. The races themselves don't pose much of a challenge, however. The difficulty more or less comes from the cars that you pick. The DRT ones in particular are a team I wouldn't recommend starting with, at least not until you've played through the other teams first and have gotten a feel for the game itself. Controls are pretty tight, turning is a whole lot easier than in the original Ridge Racer games, but the most annoying part is what happens when you bump into another car. You lose a shit ton of speed, which is something to be expected, but not to this degree. I found it to be a nuisance over time, especially when I began tackling the DRT races. But thankfully the AI are pretty easy to get through, so unless your handling sucks, you won't have too much trouble. So what's the next best thing? Another reason as to why people love this game. Well, it's the soundtrack, of course. When it comes to OSTs in gaming, Japan does not fuck around here. Most of the JRPGs, the iconic horror games from there, and the arcade races have memorable, catchy, and moving soundtracks, and Ridge Racer Type 4 is no slouch in this regard. It's listenable both in-game and outside of it. Sound quality is phenomenal too, where it could be passed off as something at least released in the mid-2000s. You have a mix of upbeat and atmospheric electronic tracks, each with their own vibe and setting, and given the celebratory nature of the game, the tracks play into the finale of it quite well, especially when you have the final race being set on New Year's Eve, and the end marks the beginning of the year 2000. Ridge Racer Type 4 is an echo of a time where racing games were made to be simple and highly replayable. I absolutely hate the way you have to unlock the cars, but the gameplay along with the incredible music hold up so well that you can generally forget that the grind is even there. And of course, the series would go on to the likes of Ridge Racer 5 and Ridge Racer 2 for the PSP, a childhood game that I really need to revisit. It is also a series that offers the best of both worlds, simple but fun arcade racing mechanics, and track racing for people that like the concept of Gran Turismo, but hate the simulation aspect of it. Also, it does come with a 60 FPS demo version of the original Ridge Racer, but it's limited to one opponent only, so have fun with that. Or better yet, just play this game instead, since it is, in my opinion, the best starting point in the whole series. We really do need a proper sequel now, a Ridge Racer 8, hopefully. But Considering where the series is right now, it is very unlikely to happen, and that is a shame, because this is one of the best arcade racing franchises I've ever played, and Ridge Racer Type 4 is definitely up there with them. Thank you for watching.